How could I assume a sound, Alice Notley asks at the beginning of the essay, American Poetic Music at the Moment. She continues, I see my own poetic career as a struggle, still going on absolutely, to find a measure or sound that suits me. And later, a poetry career is in some sense an exploration of what sounds right in one's mouth. What Alice Notley has created and brought forth in her prolific, various, sustained life in poetry reflects that what sounds right is always shifting. Notley's is a stance of disobedience, and not just against all hegemonic and totalizing forms, but against everything. She writes, it seems as if one must disobey everyone else in order to see at all. In her book of interconnected poems titled Disobedience, Notley states, the tone throughout was one of rejection of everything I was supposed to be or affirm, all the poetries, all the groups, the clothes, the gangs, the governments, the feelings, the reason. Always in a state of becoming and of transformation, powered in part by dreams, visions, and hallucination, this disobedience perpetually reinvents a space that I like to think of as nothing, that is, a negative space from which new forms can emerge. Her work demonstrates how the limits of this nothing are rife with political implications. In her haunting book, Alma or the Dead Women, begun just before 9/11, this negative space is populated by dead women in Alma and Owl, who is also God and the protector of the space. From this space of negative insistency, wails, screeches, and the articulations of dead women in the unreal true rage against the unfolding global violence, past and present, in the real untrue. This is from the poem Negative Space. I know there's a hole in my head. I know I'm dead, so probably ugly. Everything sounds like a song. This space, too, pours out of my head, this smokiness. How little there is anywhere. What could be the true things? Song, a little bit of light. And from the following poem, Safe Owl. In the negative space of no country, be equal to its air. I see negative space and the textured darkness where oppress me not, they cannot get through. In Alma, negative space is an operative space, a space where the characters debate and mount a counter-aggression and the attempt to deterritorialize a patriarchy that dictates our forms. In the summer of 2011, I convened a reading group for Alma or the Dead Women. We, a group of women-identified people, met in my garden weekly, working through the text slowly. We were often visited by hummingbirds and stray pregnant cats. We discussed how trajectories could be dismantled, how death gives new permission, and what it means to remain in the space of emergence. In my notes taken during this time, I found the following. We are ridding ourselves, reading the text, go to war. We are all becoming aligned, destroyed, and realigned together. The conversations we had about resistance and possibilities for emergences in our bleak, at best, social, economic, and political present were, for all of us, embodied shortly after with the start of the Occupy movement. In being with Alice Notley's work in preparation for this reading, I kept wondering how negative space relates to sound, the sound in one's mouth, the sound in my mouth, the sound in her mouth. In a recent interview with Brian Tier, she states, poetry works being mercy by the way the sounds work between the letters. It gives you something very subtle by the sound of it that nothing else really gives you, which is mercy. And in Culture of One, a book that interrogates and reimagines letters themselves and where mercy is also a character, quote, nothing has ever been of use except the sounds between the letters, where all the vibrations of being alive are kept. At the level of the letter, Culture of One revisions and relanguages the units of our making. Marie, the central figure in the book, lives at the dump, making art, a codex, a culture, for herself out of trash. Here her voice weaves with that of the poet. It's important to use all the garbage in the old way. Everything we discard might be precious, though there's ever more of it, and I intend to use it to make the being all become. Marie will make a new world of one out of our desperation, her talent. I am my book. What else would I be? When I die, I will be my book in the spirit of creation, hovering over the desert at midnight. I can't help but read Culture of One as imparting the importance of each of us engaging in this process for ourselves, for our creative process to intentionally make the being we'll become or are constantly becoming, and the relationship of this work to the social. Quote, where does culture come from? It comes from the materials you do it with. Sonics and the social, disobedience and negative space, mercy. Notley's work begs of us, what materials do or will we make our culture with? How do these materials resonate? What is happening in the spaces between them? How do we continue shifting the sounds in ourselves and our social and poetic practice so as to resonate, so as not to reinstate the known meaning, orthodoxies, patriarchy, capitalism? What is the generative power of the vibrations or negative space or poverty at the heart of the self or the world? Alice Notley needs little in the way of introduction, I'm sure, to most people in this room. She was born in Bisbee, Arizona, and grew up in Needles, California, in the Mojave Desert. She received degrees from Barnard College and the Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa. She was an important force in the eclectic second generation of the so-called New York School of Poetry. In 1992, she moved to Paris, France, and has remained there ever since, generally practicing no profession except for the writing, publication, and performing of her work. Notley is the author of more than 30 books of poetry, the most recent being Songs and Stories of the Ghouls, Culture of One, Reason and Other Women in the Pines, Alma or the Dead Women, and Grave of Light, New and Selected Poems. She is a recipient of many prizes, including the San Francisco Poetry Award, the Griffin International Prize, the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Poetry, the Academy of American Poets, the Nora Marshall Award, and she was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Throughout her prolific life in poetry, Alice Notley keeps discovering the forms and the sounds of how to be a creative and operative being on this drone-marshaled, heating, and wondrous planet. We are all so lucky to have her with us tonight. If luck has anything to do with it, please join me in welcoming Alice Notley.